Welcome back to the Small Games Show. Demos are a part of the order of the day again, and I think it might be as everyone was getting ready for the next fest. Steam is the market people bring their polished products to. Itch is where they polish them. That being said, Quod by Davuk is not a demo. Instead, it is a tightly designed 64KB shooter. On his itch page there is a video about how he managed to compress the game down to this size, going through each of the parts he managed to compress. Now, I'm not tech savvy enough to know the ins and outs of how this is achieved, even with the video provided, but I do know that limitations require creativity to overcome. It makes me think of Jeremy Parish's excellent NES Works series, a series that is about games, but it is also about what the NES could and couldn't do, how developers overcome this, and how different the end games of the system come out as, well, games instead of toys. Games are intrinsically tied to technology, and these two things influence and change what it can do as a medium. So, self-imposing limitations can create interesting games. Quod is a game where sacrifices had to be made, the limitations informing what it is. But it does not end up sacrificing much as a game. It was a short experience, taking up 15 minutes, but it still managed to have several guns, enemies, and a boss at the end. In playing it, I couldn't help but compare it to the first few levels of Quake. I'm very fond of a boomer shooter, in the way that it does away with some of the modern military fetishism of current shooting games to make it all about impractical weaponry, breakneck combat, and interesting level design. Quod, as well as its forefathers, is not interested in telling a conventional story. There is very little text to build a narrative out of. Instead, it builds it out of the enemies that you fight, the weaponry that you use, and the levels that you traverse, letting each of these speak for themselves. The futuristic metal-clad walls box you in. Hooded Adeptus Mechanicus-like figures attack you from around corners, and their skull-like servitors will drop out of the ceiling to ambush you. You are dropped into a conflict without context and just keep pressing on. Level design is where these games become their most expressive. At their best, they are intricate puzzle boxes where exploration rewards you with expressive combat, items to top off your health, or seemingly impossible secret areas. At their worst, they can be impossible, non-logical spaces that just become a meat grinder. Quod is closer to the first idea of the boomer shooter level. I mentioned early levels in Quake, and that is truly what this feels like. There isn't anything incredibly intricate here, but what there is still remains rewarding. I love me a secret. The actual shooting in Quod is good and violent. The guns are loud, impactful, and fun to use. Each has an area it excels in, and they are well balanced. It's hard to not point to Doom, as the use cases for each is similar. They fulfill the same niches. Your pistol works as a gun that is good until you get something else. The multi-barreled gun uses the same ammunition as the pistol, and clears out weaker enemies quickly. The shotgun is on the same level as an id Software shotgun, which is high praise, and is destructive but takes time between each shot to pump. There is also a small amount of stun when you shoot an enemy, so you want to be managing them so they do not get an attack in. It is a game that reminds you of the lesson, a good offense is a good defense. The climax of the game is a boss fight. I am not sure I've fought a good or interesting boss in games of this ilk. This one is fine when looked at next to its peers, but it is the same sort of bullet sponge that they tend to be. It will also spawn these servitor heads in for you to manage during the fight, which is a nice bit of complexity. When you beat him, the game ends with a splash screen of text, contextualising what you have just done. I always like these. They are rarely great, but are often fun, creating a greater narrative and giving a bit of a break for the player. Quod is a great bite-sized bit of fun, and an excellent shooter all around. Speaking of bite-sized, Don't Let It Starve is a horror stacking game with an escape room element, made by Eduardo Scarpato. You've been captured by a maddened French cuisine obsessive, and if you cannot satiate his hunger, he is gonna eat you. You try to fill him up by making these bento boxes broken down into grids. You then fill these out with various foods that are different sizes and shapes. It is a game about filling out Tetris-like puzzles with the choices of food in front of you. You have a recipe book that tips you off about different food combos that you want to aim for to get a score boost. For instance, 2 bits of bread and beef will get you the burger combo. These then stack with each other, and you can use components from a previous combo, so if you already have the burger, you might want to add a sausage in there, as I'm always saying, as you already have 2 pieces of bread, and this will get you the hot dog combo. You are limited to 3 randomized foodstuffs to pick from, so you are trying to plan ahead for combos, whilst trying to fill every space of the box for additional points boost. This is another game in 2 weeks that takes clear inspiration from Balatro with its scoring system. You have your score, but you can also get various multipliers, as well as base score increases. Noodles will add a flat increase in your score, for instance, which you can then add a multiplier on top of. And these items you have to buy with money, which can be earned at 1 apiece for a regular bento box, or 3 coins if you choose to take the much smaller tiny box. You can also spend a coin to get the big box, which gives you a greater capacity for a singular round of scoring. It becomes about balancing the budget for better items or a much needed large box, as your captor's appetite will need a higher score each round to fill. At the end of each round of 4 bento boxes you can pick a free boost, assuming you're still alive. The croque monsieur, for instance, will make bread much more likely to appear as one of your options. So it's a deck builder about picking items and end of level upgrades to combine into a score making machine. Oh, and then your captor comes back and demands another 4 bento boxes, and he is hungrier than before, so you will need a higher score to satisfy him. He is a very hungry boy. The visual design is disgusting, in the best way possible. None of the food looks tasty, and the hygiene standards in this room are non-existent. It's the sort of game that makes you want to wash your hands after playing. And your captor, well, he's just a pair of eyes looming at the end of a darkened space whose hands grasp outwards towards you. It uses the low poly horror elements common on itch to design something completely different. These games on itch often end up as walking sims of various types, and here we get much more in the way of mechanics. The place you're in also serves as this escape room. There are codes which you can then use on a safe, as well as bells on the wall that chime out when you ring them. The second of, I have no idea how it works. You are not just playing a game, it all takes place in a space. It reminds me of Inscription, fleshing out the world that could just be a mechanics-heavy game. It uses these elements to bring a sense of place and narrative to what could just be a purely mechanical game, and uses it to bring dread to the player, as this ain't a place you want to be. I like exploring spaces in games, and even though this is a small one, it is dense with things in it. Especially when you consider that there is a spot where you can grind the meat of your arms to help satiate the captor just a little bit. I would have personally started off with a finger, but there we go. It ends up being an incredibly charming game in themes and mechanics. My only criticism is that everything moves too slowly. Every time you put a piece of food in the bento box, it tots up your score. Your score for the individual food piece. For any items that you have adding multipliers onto it. For any combos that you have. For any lines that you have filled. And for filling the entire box. It slows the game right down. Just when I want to be slapping food down and building score. Now, of course, it does need to communicate where your score comes from, so that you can strategize the deck you are building, but it really needs another way of communicating this, so that it has a tighter iteration loop, and not just have you watching these numbers go up. But everything else in the game is stellar. So if you feel like you can deal with this slow counting of score, you should be playing it. Magical Blush is touted as a top-down metroidvania that takes inspiration from those games, as well as Zelda. You play as Arnin, a mage with the power over the elements in a world where the elemental lords have been released, and you need to go and get after them. Each of your attacks is from one of the elements, starting off with a lightning bolt you can call down onto your enemies, and these enemies each have an elemental strength, resistance, immunity, and will also attack with their own personal element. It's a game that moves quickly with a reliance on dodge and attack, weaving in and out and then land a couple of hits before needing to dodge again. As you progress through the game, you gain further attacks that all function slightly differently, each with their own elemental power behind them, and both you and your enemies will be using them. And I always enjoy learning enemy patterns, as well as their weaknesses, trying to find the key to the problem that is the fight. And once you've done that, it becomes about trying to whistle out the biggest threats, prioritising the most annoying or dangerous of their lot. And all of this happens at a satisfying speed that makes the game dynamic to play. Even in the short time in this demo, there was a decent amount of variety in the combat, so as long as they can extrapolate this for an entire game, there is something good here. Exploration rewards you with elemental currency that you can use to upgrade your abilities, as well as new abilities. On your controller you have your 4 face buttons that you can assign each ability to, but with the press of a trigger it modifies this, giving you 4 more options, so you are carrying 8 in total. I ended up getting a fireball as well as this fire sword, the second with a slightly longer cooldown but doing more damage. This added complexity is great, as it gives you a decent amount of options in any encounter. It also then makes exploration good and interesting, as you will be getting something that is genuinely rewarding. A new element means that you have a new attack, but it also means that you are now able to go and open elemental doors out in the world. So you have a whole host of places to go back and explore, even though metroidvania. The trick of having new attacks also unlocking new places slowly changes your view of each of the levels, as it updates how you approach the combat and exploration, and having this double whammy makes every update so much more exciting. Now it's hard to judge how this loop will come together here, but even with this small slice it has made what backtracking is here fun. There is a world map in Magical Blush, showing each of the levels you can travel to. You can also unlock different entrances and exits from the levels, linking this world map together in different ways. And the game signals that there is density here, but I find it so much more understandable than something like a Metroid Dread, where I found it hard to internally map how the world fitted together. By having disparate levels and reasons to come back to these levels, it makes them all so much more digestible. Weirdly, it reminds me of the mascot platformer, something like Banjo-Kazooie, where unlocking flying lets you go back to previous levels and explore more. And in this, the game can show you the progression of your character and your own personal skill, as fighting the simplistic flame turret is now no problem after taking down a tough earth golem. The animation and art is all very well done. It is all additive to the play, giving Arnin a sense of movement on the 2D plane, crashing through vases in a really fun way. The way her hair moves too, going in the opposite direction of your movement, it's all this great fluid pixel art style. There is a sense of movement that is enjoyable. All of the enemies are well animated too, breathing life into the game. I did come across one boss in my time with the game, and it became this very fun duel, learning their patterns, when to dodge and when to attack. It was much more demanding than anything up to this point, and maybe needs to be tweaked a bit, or placed later in the game. But if this is the height that the combat system is capable of, I would like to see more. I did die a lot, but the Souls light in me flashed on, and I wanted to become equal to it instead of putting down my controller in frustration. Magical Blush is a game that's being made by an Osaka-based developer, Alcasa Studio, and it reminds me of playing something like Mystical Ninja starring Gomon on the N64. I had no conception of how games were made back then, and so when a very Japanese game was given to me, I had no context for a lot of stuff in it, but it was a new game, so I played it. Now this isn't exactly pertinent to talking about this game, but it was a nice memory for it to evoke in me, so I thought I would mention it. Magical Blush has a lot of the elements this type of game needs, and if it can bring these together, as well as develop on them with some finesse, it could be a very good game indeed. I'm likely to be taking next week off. I want to get this Final Fantasy video polished, and so I'm allowing some time for that, but hopefully it should be done shortly. I just need to edit the damn thing. If you would like to support me, and I would like your support, then drop me a comment on the video. Likes and subscriptions are always appreciated too. This has been the Small Game Show. My name has been Billy. Peace.